All right, guys. So another video on Afghanistan. And I know. Doing a lot of videos on Afghanistan, but that's basically all the news, guys. And Joe Biden, right? The most popular president in history. He basically gave us an update on Afghanistan after hiding in a bunker for the last 4 to 5 days when Afghanistan was falling to the Taliban. Now, in 2020, Joe Biden, before he took office, he said he's going to do his job and take responsibility. He says he won't blame others, okay? And he said he'll never forget that the job isn't about me, it's about you, right? This is Mr. Take Responsibility Biden, that he's not going to blame anybody else. It's just going to be on him. Now, Biden had an opportunity to take responsibility for something that's obviously his fault, right? Even the liberal media, even liberal CNN, Jake Tapper has been going in on Joe Biden, right? About this debacle in Afghanistan. So Biden had a prime opportunity to just come out and say, it's all my fault and blame nobody else. And let's see if Biden actually lived up to his promise.
When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban. Under his agreement, U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021, just a little over 3 months after I took office. U.S. forces had already drawn down during the Trump administration from roughly 15,500 American forces to 2,500 troops in country. And the Taliban was at its strongest militarily since 2001. The choice I had to make as your president was either to follow through on that agreement or be prepared to go back to fighting the Taliban in the middle of the spring fighting season. There would have been no ceasefire after May 1. There was no agreement protecting our forces after May 1. There was no status quo of stability without American casualties after May 1. There was only a cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, lurching into the third decade of conflict. I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there.
Guys, did you expect anything different? Right? Biden goes out there and blames Trump. He also blamed the Afghan people. He also blamed the Afghan army. He blamed the Afghan president. He blamed everybody and kind of himself, because he did kind of say that the buck stops with him and he's not going to pass on the responsibility to the next president, blah, 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 blah. Right? He took a little bit of responsibility. But most of it, he put a lot of blame on others, right? He blamed Trump. Okay? He said he inherited the deal from Trump. And if he would have stuck to Trump's deal, his May 1st withdrawal deadline, essentially, he's saying that they would have had to go back in Afghanistan and fight the Taliban again. Something that he was not willing to do. Now, my main criticism of Biden is not pulling out of Afghanistan, okay? Because most of the American people do agree with that, right? It's how he handled the pullout is my problem, right? Because Trump's agreement, which they always tend to leave out, was contingent on the ground conditions, right? It was contingent on the Taliban not doing what they're doing right now. Obviously, Biden did not stick to Trump's agreement, which is, again, what he's missing here, right? Because in my opinion, if Trump was still in office, Trump would have probably whacked the Taliban for trying to do what they're doing right now, right? And I think that if Trump was still in office, that the Taliban would not have tried him like this. Now, they probably would have waited for Trump to do the full withdrawal and then, did what they had to do. But at the same time, they want to done it before we could even get all the troops out. I don't think they would have done that. I think they would have waited, okay? Because, I mean, hey, they obviously didn't have a problem waiting all this time, right? These guys have already said, we'll just wait, right? They cool chilling out in the mountains, right? So look, the thing is that if Biden felt that Trump's strategy was so bad, right, or that he inherited a bad deal from Trump or whatever, he didn't have to stick to it, right? But you stuck to withdrawing, and unlike Trump, you didn't at least put out there the threat of retaliation or the threat of going back in if the Taliban didn't behave. And because of that, in my opinion, that's why they're doing what they're doing, because you are seen as weak. They looked at you as weak sauce. They said, okay, we can try this guy. I do not believe that the Taliban would have looked at Trump this way. Again, I've talked about this a lot, right, in terms of how I think it would have been different under Trump. But like I said, the criticism of Biden is not the fact that he's pulling out, it's how he's doing it. And him passing the blame for Trump over something that he is 100% responsible for. You're overseeing this, not Trump. You don't have to stick to everything that Trump said or his deal. You don't have to stick to any of that. You could have done your own strategy. You could have done your own thing, and you did, right? You pushed back the deadline to September 11th to be symbolic, right? To try to be symbolic. And then, unlike Trump, you decided to leave in the middle of fighting season. Trump was like, all right, we're going to dip before y'all boys really start to fight. You know what I'm saying? Biden was like, oh, we're going to dip right in the middle of it. Okay? So I don't know, man. I don't understand where Biden's coming from this, besides trying to deflect the blame. But what I really want to talk about in this video is not Biden, right, and Trump, because I've talked about him enough. What I really want to talk about is foreign policy, right? What does this mean for China, Pakistan, and Russia as they are set to increase the Afghanistan influence? You remember what I was telling you guys before in my last video, and some of you guys might not buy into what I'm saying here, but, you know, a lot of people want to talk about human rights, women's rights, you know, stuff like that in Afghanistan, and I'm just telling people, I'm like, bro, don't be naive. They don't care about that. Nobody really cares about that. Okay, I'm not saying what's happening in Afghanistan isn't bad. It's bad, okay? I don't agree with it. I think it's wrong. I wish we could do something about it. But these countries do not care, right? They do not care. What they really care about is resources, right? What they care about is the strategic importance of Afghanistan in regards to its location in the Asia/Middle East. That's what they care about. And this article here from The Guardian, you know, I recommend that people read international news. I really do. It cuts through some of the propaganda that you get here in the United States. But it's going to outline here what this kind of means for Russia, Pakistan, and China in regards to the Taliban now taking over as basically the official government. So let's read here. Pakistan. Of all its regional neighbors, Pakistan appears to be the most exuberant and welcoming Taliban rule in Afghanistan. The hope for Pakistan is that it would enjoy more influence and leverage in Kabul under Taliban rule, giving it a strong regional ally aligned with its Islamic values. Khan, who has a personal political reason to cheer the fall of the Afghan government, was not alone in portraying the Taliban's victory as a triumph. Influential religious clerks and senior Pakistan military generals also celebrated publicly. Raja ul Haq, the chief of Pakistan's Jamaat al-Islami and Islamic political party, said in his speech it was a historic win over a superpower and would create an exemplary Islamic government in Afghanistan. Guys, do you understand what Pakistan is saying here? They're literally cheering what's happening in Afghanistan. And I mean, allegedly, Pakistan has been low-key or high-key funding the Taliban as well, which is working against our direct interest, right? And also, Pakistan, weren't they the country accused of harboring Osama bin Laden as well? Okay, Pakistan is like clearly working against American interests, but we chose to invade Afghanistan, but we didn't go into Pakistan. You know why we haven't invaded Pakistan? It's because they're a nuclear country, right? If you have nukes, you're essentially immune from the U.S. invading your country. Okay, this is how foreign policy works, guys. Pakistan is just like overtly working against the U.S. and we still low-key kind of support them, thinking that they're going to be fighting terrorists for us when they're really working in direct opposition to what we want, right? It's kind of crazy. For years, Pakistan has a long, porous border with Afghanistan, has been a sanctuary for Taliban leaders and their families, and where fighters often receive training and medical care. Pakistan has not given the Afghan Taliban any military assistance and said it pushed for peace during the Doha negotiations, but many believe the main priority for Pakistan has been to keep the Taliban on side. Of course, that's their main interest. However, many fear the strength of the Taliban's resurgence will further embolden already powerful radical Islamic groups in Pakistan and make the country more vulnerable to jihadists. Ayesha Jaz Khan, a Pakistani lawyer and writer, tweeted, "Pakistanis just don't know what's about to hit them yet." So that's Pakistan. They're kind of low-key celebrating because they have a government that they feel is more aligned with their values. And, they basically see this as a victory over the U.S., in which they've been waging their own little proxy war against us there. Russia has long criticized U.S. intervention in Afghanistan, and its spectacular failure has invoked obvious schadenfreude in the Kremlin. More than 3 decades ago, the Soviet Union evacuated its last tanks in Afghanistan over the Friendship Bridge into Uzbekistan. This week, U.S. allied warlords and their fighters were forced to flee over the same bridge. Vladimir Putin has made anti-terrorism a cornerstone of his foreign policy, comparing it to the fight against Nazism in Syria and Libya. Russia justified its backing of authoritarian leaders by saying they provide a bulwark against the rise of radicalism and chaos. Yet, in Afghanistan, the calculus is different, and a cooler realpolitik is at play. Despite naming the Taliban a terrorist group, Russia appears ready to engage if it can ensure security for its own diplomats and prevent militants from launching assaults into Central Asia allies such as Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Zamir Kabulov, Russia's presidential envoy to Afghanistan, even dangled the possibility that Russia could recognize the Taliban government based on the behavior of the new authorities, a major prize for the Taliban that would also indicate Moscow sees itself as a potential intermediary as the West pulls out. For now, the Russians are staying put. Taliban forces have taken the external perimeter of a Russian embassy under protection, Kabul said on Monday, and its Afghan ambassador, Dmitry Zernov, said Russia had promised that not a single hair will fall from the heads of Russian diplomats. Further negotiations also planned for Tuesday. He said, should those fail, Moscow is also prepared for greater instability in the region. In the last month, it has held military drills with Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, as well as separate exercises with China, which were aimed at demonstrating the determination and ability of Russia and China to fight terrorism. The timing as the Taliban raced to victory was no coincidence. So Russia's in a more curious situation here, as they claim to be fighting terrorism, right? That kind of plays into our little proxy war that we have going on with Russia and Syria right now, right? In which, Russia is backing the Syrian government, right, of Assad, okay? And the U.S. is funding those opposition forces to Assad, okay? History repeats itself, okay? But this time around, Russia is saying that, the Taliban, we don't really like y'all like that, but, y'all kicked out the U.S., so we might be able to work with y'all, okay? We might be cool with you, okay? Now, China, on the other hand, is probably the most interesting. While China was uneasy about the U.S. military engagement in Afghanistan, it has also been critical of its irresponsible withdrawal of late. In recent years, Beijing has begun to see the U.S.'s continued presence in Afghanistan as a lesser of two evils, according to Andrew Small of the German Marshall Fund, a U.S. think tank. But judging from last month's meeting with the Taliban and the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, Beijing seems to have been well prepared for this eventuality, perhaps even better off than the U.S. itself, he said. On Monday, China's propaganda agencies took this opportunity to discredit U.S. foreign policy, but Beijing is treading a careful line in its policy towards the new Taliban regime. This is because China sees the issue of Afghanistan as a quagmire where great powers have found themselves entrapped, from Britain to the Soviet Union and now the U.S. Chinese state media calls Afghanistan a graveyard of empires, and Beijing does not want to be mired in the great game in the center of Eurasian continent. All right, so this is from China News, right? This is their state media basically trolling the U.S., right, in regards to not being able to stop the Taliban, essentially. China is also showing its pragmatism in its approach. What China could do is participate in the post-war reconstruction and provide investment to help the country's future development, the Global Times quoted a senior Chinese government expert as saying on Sunday. On Monday, China spokesperson Hua Xiang said Beijing welcomed the Taliban's promise that they will allow no force to use the Afghan territory to engage in acts of detrimental to China, and to express its hope of China will be more involved in Afghanistan's peace and reconciliation process and play a bigger role in future reconstruction and economic development. For years, China has been concerned about its far west Xinjiang Uyghur region, with Beijing demanding Taliban refrain from hosting any Uyghur groups on their territory. It was the primary reason for Beijing to meet Mullah Muhammad Omar in 2000, and is still on top of China's list of concerns after the Taliban takeover, said Small. Now, what this article doesn't mention in regards to China is that they have tried to get their foot in the door in regards to Afghanistan's minerals. Okay, there were some investments in there that failed, and that's still something that's on China's radar. Okay, but again, from a geopolitical standpoint, this is really interesting because those minerals there, obviously, this is something that the former Afghan government has kind of dangled in front of the U.S. as a way to kind of motivate us to stay, right? Obviously, that didn't happen as of right now, but at the same time, we did kind of see those minerals as our way to kind of get off the Chinese minerals, right? To kind of free ourselves from the grips of China, right? And it'll be interesting to see if we actually allow China to move in to Afghanistan and to invest in Afghanistan, right? And get access to some of those materials. Now, the Taliban already has been illegally mining some of those resources to fund their projects. And with Taliban now in control of $1 trillion worth of mineral rights, that can be a concern. That can be a concern. So right now, it seems like, Russia and China, their biggest thing right now is that, hey, we don't necessarily really want to recognize y'all, but at the same time, we can work together, right? And this is why I be trying to tell people, when they keep talking about, all this other stuff. Look, a lot of these countries, man, all they really care about is protecting their people, right? And protecting their interests, right? They don't really care if the Taliban takes over the government. They really don't. But it does seem like, one thing is for sure here, that these countries are seeing this as an opportunity, right? The fact Biden's big embarrassment and the Taliban taking over the country is an opportunity for China and Russia. And we will see how they proceed forward in regards to dealing with the new Afghanistan government and whether or not they're going to actually recognize it as legit. It looks like that they will, and they're going to go from there. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.